Um, Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Luohan Webinar. I'm Verena from University of Toronto, the host of today's event. Today, we're super excited to have Professor Xiang Hui from Olin Business School, Washington University in St. Louis, to talk about the short-term effects of generative artificial intelligence on employment. Xiang studies the economics of technology. His latest research focuses on designing quality certification and rating systems for digital platforms and analyzing the economics and policy implications of artificial intelligence and blockchain. So in this paper, he's gonna tell us the research question that they study, such as how does the introduction of generative AI affect labor market outcomes in the short term? Does worker quality modify the effect of generative AI? What could be the potential explanations and what are important takeaways? So audience are welcome to unmute themselves and ask questions during the talk. Now, Xiang, you have 1 hour. Please take it from here.
Yes, thank you, Verena, very much for the introduction. And I also want to thank the organizers for inviting me here to give this talk. So I'm Xiang Hui from WUSTL, and this is joint work with my colleague, Oren Rishev, who is also at WUSTL, and Luohan Zhou, who is a PhD student at NYU. So the topic of my talk is on the short-term effects of generative artificial intelligence on employment, evidence from online labor market. So to briefly motivate, year 2022 was a big year for generative AI. So at the beginning of that year, we saw two big releases of image-based generative AI, and that is DALL-E 2 and Midjourney. And towards the end of 2022, we saw the release of ChatGPT. So these recent developments in this generative AI technology have really sparkled public interest and debate about the potential perils and promises of the technology. So what you're seeing here on this screen is just a screenshot of all the news headlines from important news outlets that I'm aware of. So what you can see here is that on the one hand, we have some quite pessimistic views that AI poses risk of extinction, the worry that AI might steal my job, and then Elon Musk saying that AI will take all of our jobs, right? So that's one end of the spectrum. And on the other end, we also see promises of optimism, like AI and human could work together, AI could help developing nations, and AI can cure all diseases, stabilize our climate, and halt poverty, right? So you see a wide range of topics and sentiment in these news articles. But one thing that they seem to share is that AI will likely transform the global economy, leading to very large societal ramifications. And therefore, it is important for policymakers to have some empirical evidence on the effect of this new technology in order to navigate through all these changes. Now, of course, in this paper, we're not going to be able to study all of these topics. So what we're going to do is to focus on a particular area which we think will be greatly affected by generative AI, and that is the future of labor market. If you look at the previous literature, the prediction on the effect is ambiguous. So on the one hand, AI could complement human workers and increase their productivity. But on the other hand, the technology could substitute worker. And by the technology, I mean generative AI, AI in general, or automation technologies. They may substitute workers, leading to mass layoffs and unemployment. So the overall effect is ambiguous. Now, another important aspect to consider here is how AI might change the composition of workers, both within and across occupations. Now, recent work has tried to predict which industries will be most affected in the future. So our work is complementary to this line of work, where we offer some concrete empirical evidence on the short-term effect of generative AI on employment. So we're going to focus on the introduction of text-based AI, which is ChatGPT, and image-based AI, which is DALL-E 2 and Midjourney. And for both types of technologies, or both types of Gen AI, we're going to study employment and compensation of freelancers in a large online labor market, which is Upwork. And we're going to use scraped data on the entire history of each freelancers on Upwork. And we're going to employ a difference in differences research design that basically leverages the before-after changes across different occupations that were differentially affected by these technologies. So what do we ask? Well, first, how does the introduction of generative AI affect labor market outcomes in the short run? And in addition, how does worker quality, is it going to moderate or potentially exacerbate the effect of generative AI? So just to give you a preview of results, we find that the introduction of Gen AI has a negative effect on workers' employment and compensation. And in addition, we find that worker quality does little to moderate the adverse effects. In fact, if anything, we find suggestive evidence that high-quality workers seems to be disproportionately negatively affected by this new technology. And I will talk about the potential reasons behind these heterogeneity results. Okay, but this is what we find in the paper. All right, so let me jump into background and setting. So I don't think I need to say too much about generative AI models to this crowd. So I'll just say that we study ChatGPT, which was launched in November 2022 by OpenAI. So the main goal of the technology is to generate text that's both natural and informative. The technology is very accessible, right? It's free and easy to use for the general public. The second type of Gen AI we study is image-based AI. This includes DALL-E 2, which was released in April 22, and Midjourney, which was released in July 2022. So just to show you a little bit of data here, so what you're looking at in this graph is Google Trends for the search term GPT, AI, and Midjourney and DALL-E 2 combined. So what you're seeing is that, for example, for the search term GPT, there was basically no interest before its launch, right, before November 2022. And then that was followed by a sharp increase in search volume. You see a similar pattern for Midjourney and DALL-E 2, right? So before the summer of 2022, there was basically zero search interest, and then that increases after the launch of these AIs, although that increase is smaller relative to GPT. And lastly, if you look at the search term AI, you see the qualitative similar pattern that there was some interest before, ChatGPT, for example, but that interest really has gone up after the release of ChatGPT. So all of these patterns in the graph are consistent, with the notion that there's a growing user base of these technologies after their launches. Okay. So our empirical setting is Upwork, which is one of the largest online labor market in the world. So what the platform does is that it matches employers with freelancers for a specific, usually short-term remote jobs. So jobs on this platform are quite diverse, ranging from copy editors to graphic designers to developers to administrative support. So pretty much all of the jobs that you could think of that could be done remotely on the internet. Okay. So what you're seeing here is a screenshot of an example job posting. Basically, you have the job title, you have the description, and you have the job category, which in this case is full stack development. And then you have this software that's required for the job, which is Laravel. Okay. You also see compensation and the expertise level that's required to do this job. And as a freelancer, you can submit a proposal to apply for these jobs. And as a potential employer, you're going to see all of these profiles of these freelancers from which you're going to make your choice for your job based on information highlighted by the platform, like ratings, number of jobs the freelancer has done, and so forth. Okay, so that's how Upwork works. So we think that Upwork is a good setting to study our question, right? To study the short-term effect of generative AI for a few reasons. So first, the platform is much more flexible compared to traditional employment with a lot of contract renegotiation and rehiring going on. So while we think that AI or generative AI is probably too early to replace full-time employment, we might already be seeing some actions on these spot labor market with very high turnover positions. And the second reason is that we have very diverse categories of jobs on this platform, and that is necessary for our identification strategy, which again exploits across occupation variation. And lastly, and importantly, we have data, right? We observe almost complete work histories of freelancers on the platform. So let me just be upfront here that one limitation of our data set is that we do not observe private jobs or jobs that happened off the platform, right? So we only scraped whatever we can observe from the platform. So we do not observe what we cannot observe. So that means that the negative effect from our study does not necessarily mean an overall reduction in employment. All right, so in terms of data, we scraped public history of all freelancers on Upwork in a certain time point, which was April last year. The sample period is going to be from January 2022 through the time that we scraped the data. We're going to focus on freelancers who work only in one occupation, and that's because we're using these across occupation variations for identification. And that leaves us with a main sample of around 80,000 freelancers. Our main outcome variable are monthly number of jobs and income aggregated at the freelancer by month level. And we're going to winterize these outcomes at the 99th percentile. In addition, we're also going to observe freelancer characteristics, like their past employment, how much money they have earned in the past, and their ratings, and so forth. So I will talk about exactly what they mean, when we talk about when we get to the relevant results. All right, so here let me show you a bit of statistics. So what you're seeing in this table, in the first columns. The first few columns correspond to the sample for ChatGPT, and the last few columns corresponds to the sample for image-based AIs. So you see that for both samples, the number of freelancers, number of observation is 80,000. Sorry, number of freelancers, right? The data set is at the freelancer by month level. So we have around 80,000 freelancers. And about 16 or around 15% of them are US-based, right? So, so that means that the majority of the freelancers in our sample are actually non-US-based, right? Most of them from developing countries like India. So you should keep this caveat in mind, when we interpret the results. The percentage of freelancers who are top-rated, right, who are platform certified, is around 1 in 3 people. They have a past job success rate of 62%. They charge $28 on average. The one thing I want to highlight is that, on average, freelancers get a job, every 2 months to every 3 months, right? And their monthly earning is around $200 per month. Although the standard deviation is quite large, so there's a large heterogeneity in earnings and number of jobs across freelancers, right? But based on this number, it's clear that these freelancers probably also do something off the platform as well, right? So that's another caveat to keep in mind when we interpret the results. Okay. All right, so research design, we're going to be using a difference in differences. We're going to study the performance before and after the release of generative AI models. Again, ChatGPT was announced in November 2022, and image-based AIs, DALL-E 2 and Midjourney, they were released in April and July 2022, but we're going to be coding the post-dummy to be post-April in order to be conservative in our estimate. We're going to compare freelancers in occupations that are more affected by generative AI versus freelancers that are less affected by generative AI. Now, for image-based AI, the definition of the more affected occupations or our treatment occupations is intuitive because this image-based AI were designed for a very particular purpose. So we're going to be coding image, art, and design-based occupations as being in the treatment group, right, as being the more affected group relative to other categories. However, for ChatGPT, the definition of more affected category gets a little bit tricky. Right, so we did try various things, but at the end, our idea is to focus on the immediate capability of the technology rather than future capability of the technology. So we're going to be coding writing-related occupations as the more affected occupations or as the treatment occupations. Examples of writing-related occupations are content writing, proofreading, and copy editing. Okay? So why do we define treatment this way? Right? Why should writing-related occupations be disproportionately affected by ChatGPT relative to other occupations in the short run? Well, we think there are a few reasons. So first of all, writing or ChatGPT was trained specifically to predict and generate text as at least based on the document released by OpenAI. And therefore, we think that while ChatGPT has the potential to affect many industries, writing related tasks allow for a straightforward application of ChatGPT's text generating capability, even in the short run. Right? So writing related jobs are just more relevant in the short run compared to other types of jobs. And the second reason is that writing-related jobs are consistently ranked by experts as the most exposed jobs to generative AI. And lastly, we again look at Google Trends, and we have evidence suggesting that users are particularly interested in searching ChatGPT together with writing-related tasks. And more specifically, what you're seeing here is basically Google Trends for the search term GPT in conjunction with domains on Upwork, right? So you have GPT writing, GPT admin support, GPT creative, and so forth. So what you're seeing here in this graph is that prior to the launch, right, prior to November 22, there was basically no interest, and that that followed by a sharp interest pretty much all of the keywords. But one keyword that stand out above the rest is GPT writing, right, which is this top curve here, and that's consistent with the notion that while GPT is affecting many industries, its implications for writing related tasks is just more pronounced, at least in the short run, right, during our period of study. And notes that to the extent that other domains are also affected by ChatGPT, but to a lesser extent, our results would be an underestimate of the true effect, and this is under the Sutva assumption. All right, so our regression specification is the standard, BID specification. So on the left-hand side of the regression, we have our outcome of interest, which is monthly number of jobs and income, right? So remember that our data set is at the freelancer by month level, right? So that's that. So we're going to be looking at the total intensive margin and extensive margin, and for total income or number of jobs, as well as intensive margin, we're going to use inverse hyperbolic sign transformation for our main specification. And then for extensive margin, we're going to be using a dummy variable for whether a worker found any job or worked in any job in a particular month. Now, on the right-hand side of the regression, we have our post dummy, which is an indicator for post-introduction of the two types of generative AI. TI is a indicator for affected occupations or for the treatment occupations. XIT is a vector of time-varying freelancer characteristics like feedback score, number of jobs, and so forth. Okay? Alpha I is freelancer fixed effects, delta T, month fixed effects, and we're going to cluster standard error at the occupation level, which is the level of treatment assignment. Okay? So before I show you any regression results, let me show you some DID event study graphs. So this is the graph for both outcome variable, number of jobs and earnings, and for both types of technologies, right? So recall that in order for our DID to work, we need the parallel trends assumption, which says that absent the treatment and control group would have followed the parallel trends, right? So what we are seeing here is that we have relative parallel trends in the pre-period, followed by a sharp decrease afterwards, right? So that's consistent with having a causal effect. So is there a question? Okay. All right. In terms of the regression estimates, so there are two panels in this table. Panel A for the introduction of ChatGPT and panel B for introduction of image-based AIs. And in column 1 and 2, we have the totals, right? Total number of jobs and total income. So what this coefficient means is that after the introduction of ChatGPT, freelancers in more affected category, or in this case, freelancers in the writing-related occupations experienced a 2% drop in number of jobs and a 5.2% drop in income relative to freelancers in non-writing related jobs. Okay. On column 3, we look at the extensive margins. This is saying that the probability that a freelancer in writing-related jobs find a job decreases by 1.2 percentage point after the introduction of ChatGPT, and this corresponds to about 6 to 7% job considering the baseline. Column 4 and 5, we look at the intensive margin. So conditional on having worked in a given month, their freelancers' number of jobs decreases by 4.7%, and there's also a 5% decrease in income, but the estimate is very noisy, right? So it's not statistically significant. Okay, so that's the result for ChatGPT. For image-based generative AIs, you see that the estimates are qualitatively very similar. In particular, if you look at the total number of jobs and income, these estimates are pretty much the same compared to the estimates for ChatGPT, and we find that to be quite reassuring because these two types of technologies, they happen at different time points, and they worked on a different set of freelancers. So the fact that the point estimates are almost identical, we think really speaks to the internal validity of the research design, as well as the potential generalizability of these results. And I should also quickly say that this is mostly consistent with other work studying generative AI, and at least as large as some of the other labor market shocks. All right, so we did a lot of robust tests. In particular, we tried alternative specifications where we estimate the result without any control and with different sets of controls. We also tried different transformations of the dependent variable, logit, Poisson, negative binomial. We also tried alternative ways of calculating standard error. So we tried different levels of clustering, bootstrap standard error, and we did some exact inference on the standard errors. Next, we also used different samples for estimation. So for example, we used a coarsened exact matching to match freelancers with the same characteristics or with very similar characteristics. We also try estimate the results using a balanced sample. So all of the results here are very robust. We also to mitigate the concern that there could be differential seasonal trends for different industries, we also did a year-on-year comparison with a differences design. And again, the results here are by and large very similar to our main estimates. And lastly, we also try to look at effects on entry. So we have very weak suggestive evidence that entry decreases, but the estimates there are very noisy, so we try not to make too much of that results. Okay. All right, so that's the first result. The second result that we're interested in is whether the negative effects on employment are moderated by workers' quality. So there could be reasons to think why ChatGPT could exacerbate inequality or shrinks inequality, and I'll talk about that in a couple of slides. So we think that understanding heterogeneity here can shed light on the potential effect on inequality across workers. Of course, quality is going to be always hard to define. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to essentially try different ways of defining quality and see if we see any consistent patterns across all these definitions of quality. So in particular, we have some past performance measure like number of jobs that the person has done in the past, how much money they have earned in the past, their success rate, the skill level necessitated by past jobs. We also look at platform certification, the top-rated badge, and hourly rate stated by the freelancer, which we take as another proxy for quality. Okay. So just a quick note that some of the measures are observable only at the time of scraping, and for others, we're going to be using pre-treatment averages to define.
Sorry, may I ask a question?
Yes.
What do you mean by skill level? How do you quantify that?
So for each job posting, it specifies whether we need an expert, whether the employer needs an expert, intermediate skill level, or novice. So we're going to code those three levels as 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to be taking pre-treatment averages. And then
so it's a self certification, like the freelancers just rate themselves.
So this is the skill level that was specified by the employer.
By the employer.
Yeah, by the employer.
By demand, and the freelancer just see how much skill level is required for the consumer, and they somehow but it's in the end of the day, it's actually the self-rated index of skill level. Okay, I see.
Yeah. Great. So here's the results for ChatGPT. So for panel A, we have monthly number of jobs, and panel B, we have the other outcome variable, which is monthly income. So essentially, we have a triple difference, specification here, and we're particularly interested in this triple interaction term: post times treatment occupation times the heterogeneity variable, which is specified in the last row of the table. So for these heterogeneity variables, we also IHS transform them, inverse hyperbolic sign transform them when they are continuous. So what do we see here? So if we look at column 2, this number means that a 1% increase in past income, from a freelancer is going to be correlated with a 0.5% larger job in number of jobs per month. And similarly, a 1% increase in income is going to lead to a 1.7%, more negative effects of generative AI on monthly income, right? So that's how you would read the table. So one thing I want to highlight is that across the board, right, across the different ways of defining quality, regardless of whether it's being defined based on past performance or platform certification or hourly rate, it seems like the triple interaction term is always a negative, although sometimes it's not very statistically significant. And similarly, for image-based AIs, if we again focus on the triple interaction term, we get negative estimates most of the time, although not all the time, and we get statistically significant estimate for about half of the cases, right? So that's what we're seeing for both sets of results. So we take this as suggestive evidence that higher quality workers, they are actually disproportionately hurt. Keeping in mind the caveats that not all of the estimates are significant, and some of in a few times they are positive. But it seems like at the minimum, what we can say is that being of high quality does not seem to mitigate the adverse effects of generative AI. And this is actually a bit of a surprising result, because if you look at the previous literature, high quality workers, they're generally less threatened by adverse market shocks, be it technological shocks or other sort of policy shocks. So we cannot give a definitive answer to the mechanism here, because mainly because of data limitations, right? Because we only observe equilibrium outcome. We do not observe job postings. We do not observe bids and offers, and so forth. But we do try to offer some explanations that we think is plausible. So first, there could be a demand side reason that basically AI is leveling the playing field. So it's shrinking the quality gap between high type and low type workers, but high type continue to charge higher price and therefore see a lower demand in the short run. And this hypothesis is consistent with what we observe in the data, where the high type charges a higher price compared to the low type, and that price doesn't seem to decrease after the introduction of ChatGPT. Okay? So that's first potential explanation. The second explanation is more on the adoption side, on the supply side, which is that maybe low quality freelancers are more likely to adopt and benefit from generative AI. So this is consistent with some of the newer experimental work that randomly give access to generative AI tools to workers. So we try to look for this in our data by, for example, searching for terms like Gen AI or ChatGPT in seller's profile. Unfortunately, we have very few of these cases, so we cannot really study adoption given our script data set. And lastly, it could be that we're just measuring some confounding correlations, right? It could be that quality is correlated with some unobservable freelancer characteristics. So for example, it could be the case that high quality freelancers, they might be taking some fundamentally different types of jobs compared to low quality freelancers. And for some reason, these high quality jobs, they're just more affected by generative AI. So we do not think that this is the case. So what we did is that we basically try to extract information from job titles and skills necessitated by each types of jobs. And we try to see whether those job characteristics differ by high type versus low type of freelancers. We did not find any significant and robust evidence there. That said, we cannot completely rule out this confounding story because, again, we only observe what we are able to observe. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, if I understand correctly, the first two explanations are actually contradicting with each other, right? Because if the demand for high quality workers are decreasing, it means perhaps the consumers can use AI to do some high quality jobs so that they don't need that much high quality freelancers. But for the second explanation, it means it's actually AI is actually more helpful for low quality jobs. So you see what I mean? So
Yes, yes.
So basically the first two explanations are there must be one correct, one wrong.
So first of all, we cannot definitively say which one is which. So the difference between the first one and the second one is that first one focuses more on the demand side, right? Whereas the second one focuses more on the supply side. So the first one is about what consumers think. Like you said, after the introduction of ChatGPT, maybe in consumers' eyes, there's no longer a difference between high quality and low quality workers, right? So in some sense, your consumers are facing a more homogeneous product, right? There's no quality differentiation anymore. And in that case, price just becomes the more salient attributes that consumers consider. And therefore, they they will be more likely to choose the lower price one, which is also correlated with the low quality one. Right? So that's more of a demand side explanation. Whereas the second one is more of a supply side, that, you know, as a freelancer, as a seller, who adopts the technology versus not, and who benefits more from it. So you know, the angles of these two mechanisms are different.
Hey, Xiang, can I ask?
Yes. Yeah.
Can I ask, related to the demand story?
Yes, please. Yeah, you're muted. Robin, you're muted. I think we're expecting.
Sorry, I just
Oh
muted
yeah,
myself.
no worries.
Oh no.
I can hear you.
Oh, I don't know what happened.
No worries. I can hear you fine.
Sorry, please continue.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm wondering whether you can check the total job posts, like job posts from consumers, whether that level change or not.
Yeah, that's a great point. Unfortunately, we do not have that data. We do not have data on job postings. We only observe equilibrium. We only observe job postings that were fulfilled, because you know, we scrape the data, and the way we scrape it is by going to each freelancer's. You know, under each freelancer, there's a complete work history of these freelancers. So these are all the jobs that were fulfilled.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Although we think that the results is mainly demand driven, and you know, I actually have a bullet point, you know, when I in my conclusion slide, and the reason is that what we find in our data set is that there's a decrease in equilibrium quantity. Okay, so there's a decrease in Q. There's a decrease in equilibrium employment, but if you look at the price, average price per job, that doesn't seem to increase. Okay, so if you think about in Econ 101, right, you have a demand curve, you have a supply curve. When there's a decrease in Q, but no increase in price, that's more consistent with the demand decrease, right? Because if it were like a decrease in supply, then you would expect a higher price. So we think that this result, you know, given the short run nature and what we see in the data, is more likely driven by demand rather than supply. Okay. All right. So yeah, I saw the thumb up, so I think that means good. So let me conclude here. So what do we find in this paper? Well, we find that freelancers in occupations that are most affected by generative AI experienced a reduction in both employment and earnings. And in addition, we find that offering high quality service does not seem to mitigate the negative effect. And if anything, we have some suggestive evidence that this might even exacerbate it. So what are some of the implications? Well, first, the results suggest that AI technology may have some substantial economic and societal ramifications. And this is especially true for who we study in this paper, which are workers who do not have formal protection against these adverse labor shocks. And the second implication is that, you know, our results suggest that generative AI may not increase inequality, or at least in the short run. But if you look at this result from a different angle, you know, the technology might be eroding workers' competitive advantage because even offering high quality service may not shield workers from the negative effect of generative AI. So let me end my talk by giving you a list of caveats and discussion on long run effects. So first of all, one big caveat of our result is that by design we're looking at the freelancer market. On this market, all of the pretty much all of the jobs are short terms and they're unbundled tasks. So that means that the effect in traditional labor market setting might look different. Okay, so that's a big caveat to keep in mind when you're trying to extrapolate the results to a more general labor market setting. In addition, like I said, we do not really observe technological adoption, so it will be meaningful to study drivers as well as the effect of technological adoption for future research. To Robin's point, we can't really separate demand versus supply, although if you think about economics 101, lower Q and no higher price is consistent with the demand decrease. By design, our study is going to capture only short-run effects. Long-run effects can be very different for various reasons. First, AI technology might be improving over time. And we know from the technology literature that adoption of a new technology could take years, if not more than a decade. So all of these changes over time could affect the long-run effect of generative AI, both within and across occupations. The second reason is that there could be development of complementary assets, be it physical or organizational or other sort of virtual assets, and that could really bring out the effect of generative AI. And lastly, there could be various strategic responses by firms, by workers, which can also affect the effects of generative AI in the long run. And last but not the least, the total welfare effects of the technology might be broader. So first of all, there could be spillover effects across industry. So in fact, so I have a paper with Eric Brynjolfsson and Meng Liu where we study the introduction of AI-based machine translation on eBay. So while this AI-based machine translation might reduce the wage of translators or interpreters, what we find is that the introduction of the technology dramatically increases the amount of international trade by small businesses on the platform. So this is a good example where lower cost in one industry could benefit other industries that uses it as an input, right? So there could be spillover effects across industries. And lastly, consumers could potentially benefit from potentially lower prices and new services that was enabled by these new technologies. Okay. So that's all I have for my talk. Thank you very much for your attentions and questions.
Hi, Xiang. Very interesting talk. So I have a question on like the empirical, like the empirical setting. Like, do you know the portion or the ratio of the workers that kind of require ChatGPT or image-based Gen AI tools? So it really depends on, like, for the whole platform, if like 10% of the workers are using these tools or their occupations are related to these tools, it's kind of different from like the situations where like 90% of the workers or the occupation need this kind of tools.
Right. This is a great question. Unfortunately, I do not have a good answer to that. Like I said, we tried to look for adoption in our data set, but out of like these 80,000 freelancer profile, for example, we only have like 50 people who mentioned ChatGPT or generative AI in their profile. So I don't think that means that only 50 out of 80,000 people are actually using ChatGPT. It just means that we have a very lousy measure of adoption. So unfortunately, we cannot say much about adoption, and we think that it's going to be very important to think about adoption, the effect of adoption, or even, like you said, the general equilibrium effect of adoption for future research.
Xiang, I have a few questions.
Sure.
Also a bit related to what the others have already been mentioned. So I'm still a bit remain a bit dubious about the results. I'm speculating that, for instance, if there's a decline, in aggregate demand, because I mean, if you look at the results, the decrease in the number of jobs is 2%, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, economically, I don't think that has much economic significance. I mean, I know the result is statistically significant, right? So I'm just speculating, could it be that there's a decrease in overall demand? And the reason why you find the effect to be disproportionately more significant for high quality workers is because they may have experienced the same shock, but because of their higher unit rate. So when you look at income earnings, they come out as the ones that are more affected. So the whole finding seems to me, because I mean, if you look at your empirical, if you look at your regression, your equation, the control variables there, I mean, it's all about the characteristics of the freelancers, right? Yeah. I don't know how many you have in there, but my hunch is that probably it's not a very long list of control variables. So I'm just, seems to me that, alternatively, it could just be a simple decline in aggregate demand. And whatever based on your sample, whatever robustness checks you do, you will find similar results if you do not account for that. So that's my main sort of concern with the finding of the paper.
Sure.
And another thing is, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned in the paper that the sample starts from April 2023, or right?
2022, yeah.
22, right?
January 2022.
Because ChatGPT was released somewhat earlier, right? It was in November 2022. So I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the data for two different generative AI, they start from different dates. And you mentioned that to be conservative, you cut off somewhere in April 2023 or something like that. So I'm just curious, why don't you just allow for this different starting dates? I mean, you could just, for GPT, you could just start sample from 2022 November.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also another thing is that I'm thinking, the time when it was launched or announced, probably for the tool to have an impact on the labor market, I mean, there probably is a time lag, right? I don't think, the day it was announced, you would observe the effect right away. I don't know to what extent, if you sort of allow for a time lag, perhaps the result might be more, in your favor or more significant.
Right. So you did mention a lot of questions. So let's make this more conversational, because by the end of if after I answer your last question, I'm gonna forget about your first question. So to your first question, do we see an immediate effect? So if you look at this Google Trends graph, it does seem like search interest for GPT related jobs went up right afterwards, right? If anything, it seems to at least for writing related jobs, it seems to have peaked in March, right? So there is a short run. It suggests that there's a short run growing user base for GPT for these different type of tasks. What else did you add? So you mentioned that how large the estimates are. It's only 2%. So one thing that I want to mention is that if you look at the graph that I just showed you, it seems like GPT is also affecting. This is it. It's also affecting other categories, right? So if we're comparing, so under the suitable assumption, okay. So I'm happy to talk about the suitable assumption as well. But under a suitable assumption, it seems like while GPT is affecting writing related jobs in a negative way, it is also probably affecting other jobs in a negative way. So if you compare writing versus non-writing job, we actually get an underestimate of the true effect, right? So in that sense, that could explain why you think the 2% is small. But even keeping that in mind, if you look at other papers like Acemoglu, Restrepo, and Feinbaum and Gross, so these different other papers, they study different types of shocks to labor market, like unionization or other technological shocks. Alter it all is automation. The estimates on the overall labor market is on the ballpark very similar, right? So it's not that. So a 5% job in income is a very big effect, in the labor market literature. Okay, so it's not per se a very small job. And then you also mentioned something about aggregate demand. So I didn't quite get that point. So we're trying to, so our point is that there's a reducing demand for freelancers, right? So if there's an aggregate, there's a drop in aggregate demand for writing related jobs, that's sort of exactly what we're trying to show. So maybe I missed something there.
Right, thank you. About the effect, whether it's economic significance, I think my main point is that because you have chosen to examine the group that will be most affected, and if for the most affected group the effect is only 2%, that only means for the other groups will be smaller. And so, I mean, for the other papers, probably they have a general average effect, finding something like 2, 3, 5%. So I guess that's sort of the difference I want to highlight. Because for the most effective, it's only 2%. Then for the others, it will only be smaller or even more mild, right?
Yeah, it could be. So like I said, the 2% is the effect on writing minus the effect on non-writing related jobs, right? So to the extent that the non-writing related jobs are also affected, this comparison is going to give us an underestimate of the true effect. So I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just more broadly speaking, one can think about various ways of trying to identify the effects, right? I mean, here we just, we have thought about a lot of ways of identifying the effects. For example, we could rely on just year-on-year comparison. We could even define a treatment intensity measure based on Google Trends. But the problem is that there are problems with different ways of defining treatment and control group, right? So for year-on-year comparison, you might, if there's if there's sort of instability of market trends on Upwork, then a year before might not be a good control group for the treatment year. And we also thought about using this Google trend intensity to define treatment. But the problem here is that we don't really observe the underlying data, right? So we don't know if there's a changes in the underlying population, who uses Google, and so forth, right? So it's not. So at the end, we choose sort of a relatively. We think it's a more conservative and clean way of defining treatment, which is just to focus on the immediate capability of the technology, which is writing related jobs, to think about that as treatment, and also for image-based AI, I think the definition of treatment group there is a little bit more straightforward because technology is only for writing, for image and art related jobs. So we hope that these results together, are convincing.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, Xiang.
Hi, yes.
I'm kind of wondering, is it possible that that high quality workers they simply just pivot to other projects in their lives? I remember there are so many short clips going viral on WeChat, on YouTube, on TikTok, whatever, telling you how to start your business using ChatGPT, generative AIs. So I'm kind of wondering, my intuition is that it will be just easier for high quality workers to pick up this apparatus and start their own businesses.
Right. So there are a couple of things. So substitution could happen on the platform or off the platform. So first of all, we don't see much a substitution on the platform. So it's not that high quality workers they're switching to a different category. We do not observe that in our data. Now for off platform substitution, so first of all, we don't know. Like the honest author is that we don't have data, so we don't know definitively. One thing that, as I was mentioning, is that it seems like the price, the equilibrium price of the jobs hasn't increased. So if these high quality workers they somehow have better opportunity off the platform, so that there's a decrease in supply on the platform, then you would expect to see a higher equilibrium wage, right? Higher equilibrium price when there's a reduction in supply of job, which we do not see. But that said,
Yes, sorry for slowing you down.
No
That's
worries.
actually something I'm trying to get my head around, because I feel like if the demand side, I understand right now the remaining segment of the supply has just lower quality, right? Just offers a lower quality. Is it possible that is it still true that that we still have high price? simply because the supply goes down? I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry. When I say price, I mean within worker price, like not.
I understand the wage. I understand. Then I guess that's my point, right? If the demand side of the labor market, they know that the quality of the supply goes down, their willingness to pay. I feel like their willingness to pay should also go down, right?
But why would their willingness to pay for high quality workers go down? Because I understand your because for people who are always fast, for example, right, that price also didn't go up. Because like if you think about the top rated ones, they have better opportunity elsewhere, right? Their price should go up because less people are willing to do things on Upwork. But again, like this is all sort of trying to inferring what happens using equilibrium outcome, right? So it's we cannot say things definitively. And also, I do think that what you're suggesting seems more relevant in the longer term when in the short term, if you have to ask me, like even without looking at the data, I would say that probably demand effect is almost always the quickest effect that you find in the short run. But in the longer term, there will be various margins of adjustment. And I actually think that what you mentioned is gonna, like, if someone has data on that, that would be like super cool.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I'm not trying to push back this demand side story. I just kind of wondering. I mean, I feel like the main takeaway of your work is that the high quality workers, they are hurt, right? I just want to get a sense of to what extent they are kind of actually hurt, or is it likely that they can get quote unquote compensated, right? They substitute the way to make extra money somewhere else. Thanks to ChatGPT.
I fully understand. Yeah. So I think, like I said, we should be careful here, and they are hurt in the sense that they're not really switching jobs on the platform, and they are experiencing lower equilibrium employment and no higher price. So that's why that's the sense that they are hurt.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So we still have 3 minutes left. So we're gonna allow for the last question.
And Xiang, I have a question.
Oh, hi, Ginger.
And do you know anything about those that list job requests on this website? For example, which industry they come from? Did they try to hire more or lay off more regular workers somewhere else, like in Burning Glass or other data sets? I mean, this may be related to your off-platform substitution.
Right. You mean, do we have data on employers?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't have much data on employers, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah. It seems like the typical employer on Upwork is people like you and me, like at least based on their profile, based on eyeballing a few of their profile. Maybe there are some big firms that we can match using data from Burning Glass. I don't know on top of my head, but we can look into that.
All right, perfect. Let's see if we still have another question on the floor. If no, we can conclude today. All right. It's a very, very interesting talk, and thank you so much, Xiang, for coming to today's seminar. And if anyone has questions, please feel free to send him emails or just send emails to Luohan Academy. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming to today's webinar. So we will conclude today. Let's call it a day.
Thank you very much, Verena, for moderating the session. And thank you all for attending the talk and asking questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.